Hello everyone, here I am to talk about what else I saw in November. Once again, we have a pretty short list, which surprises me. I have been expecting that December would be a short list because it's such a busy month and I often don't get to watch a whole lot of movies. Last year, it was really short. But I wasn't expecting that to be the case for November, and yet here we are and only have 4 movies to talk about. But having fewer movies to get through means that I can spend a little extra time talking about this first one, which is a movie I had considered giving the solo review treatment. Movie number 1 is the 1974 adaptation of one of Agatha Christie's most famous books, Murder on the Orient Express, in which Albert Finney's Hercule Poirot must solve a murder aboard a snowbound train. A few of you may recall that last April to be exact, I watched the 2017 Kenneth Branagh version of this story, and I was not impressed. At the time that I did my mini review of it, I felt that I ought to watch the 74 movie for comparison. I'd only seen parts of it before, not the whole thing. But the Branagh movie left me so disgruntled that I kind of wanted nothing to do with Murder on the Orient Express for a long while. So the 74 movie's been sitting on my Amazon Prime watch list for the last year and a half until I finally felt like watching it last month. And by finally felt like watching it, I don't really mean that I was eager for it. It was more like, alright, this is gonna leave Prime eventually, and then the onus will be on me to order it from the library, and I probably will never do that, so we should just get it over with, just watch it. And so we did, and oh my goodness, I liked it so much better than the more recent version. The storytelling isn't so convoluted, and all the different characters are more distinct, which makes it easier to follow, although it is still a challenge to keep the characters straight, but that has to do with the source material itself. The movie begins with a prologue introducing the audience to the Armstrong case and refers back to that footage at key moments. I thought this was smart. When the case came up later, we weren't like, wait, what? Who? What's he talking about? That's not to say that the various deductions Poirot makes in this whodunit don't seem to come out of the blue. They do. Both adaptations have a problem with that. But at least here we have some prior knowledge of the case. It's not totally foreign to us. Overall, this felt like a more straightforward adaptation of the book, although it's been a long time since I read it. It's a dialogue-heavy murder mystery, not an action-packed thriller, and director Sidney Lumet treated it accordingly. The film has a hazy look with a soft glow about the edges, I presume to give it that old-timey feel. The Art Deco style is amplified in a tasteful, appealing way, and there are 0 sensational action scenes added in. With a slightly longer runtime of 128 minutes and a pace that keeps things moving, each character gets an opportunity to make an impression. That's where the cast comes in, and also where I suspect my personal bias is most evident. Because let's face it, I prefer old movies and old actors, so I was a lot more excited to see this star-studded cast of veteran actors working together than I was to see the cast in the 2017 version, which, yes, has a lot of famous people in it, but for the most part, nobody that I really care about. It was extra fun to be pleasantly surprised by each familiar name in the opening titles, to wonder who each actor was going to play and discuss which actors are still alive, which unfortunately is not many of them. It did take me a while to warm up to Albert Finney's version of Poirot, where Finney's nearly unrecognizable under all that hair and makeup. In my mind, Poirot is such a locked-in amalgamation of David Suchet's interpretation and what my own imagination has conjured up when reading the books that it's hard for me to allow for anything different. And Finney's Poirot is quite different. But he was such a great convincing actor and so fully immersed in the part that it wasn't too long before I was on board with his interpretation. The entire cast is impressive, though. Lauren Bacall, Ingrid Bergman, who played against type and won the Supporting Actress Oscar, Sean Connery, Vanessa Redgrave, John Gielgud, Wendy Hiller, Anthony Perkins, Michael York, Jacqueline Bisset. Some standouts for me: Richard Widmark, one of my mom's favorites, who I didn't even know was in the movie until it started. Jean-Pierre Cassel, one of the few people here who I don't think I've seen in anything else, but I really liked his performance. Martin Balsam, who added a lot of humor, and it was nice to see character actor George Coulouris getting a decent supporting part at a later point in his career. Anyway, to make an overly long mini-review short, I thought it was a really good movie, and to anyone who wants to watch an adaptation of this particular Agatha Christie novel, this is the version I would recommend. I have much less to say about movie number 2, a film we found on Amazon Prime. All of these movies were watched on Amazon Prime, by the way. It's a 1952 British movie called Venetian Bird, also known as The Assassin. Richard Todd stars as a British agent sent to Venice to track down a man who's supposed to receive a reward for saving someone's life during the war. But Todd's character unexpectedly stumbles onto an assassination plot instead. This was a fairly good movie, co-starring Eva Bartok, John Gregson, and George Coulouris. Oh dear, 2 movies with George Coulouris in a row, that's not supposed to happen. I found Todd's character a bit tough to get to know, but that's kinda how it is with spies and agents, especially British ones. I never knew where this one was going, which made the climactic events especially exciting. There are some good tense scenes. I feel like it may not have been the most memorable film, as I'm finding it difficult to come up with more to say about it, but it was an entertaining 90-minute adventure. Movie number 3 is one I've been wanting to watch for months, and I finally got to it. The King's Choice, a 2016 Norwegian film about the 3 days in April 1940 when the Germans arrived to, quote, help defend Norway. The king and his family flee the palace only to be pursued by the Germans. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister and his cabinet are falling apart, and the German envoy in Oslo struggles to maintain his now tenuous position. When this first popped up on my radar, probably recommended by Amazon based on other things we had watched, and I read that it shone a spotlight on the King of Norway struggling to deal with the Nazi invasion, I wanted to see it, and I am very pleased to report that it was every bit as good as I'd hoped. It was both informative and engrossing. Actual scenes of the war are few, but important and tense and very well done. It's an excellent drama, especially strong in its development of characters, chiefly the elderly king, but also the aforementioned German envoy, and in its exploration of various relationships under pressure. I highly recommend this one as a World War II history piece, but also as a good, moving drama. The only criticism I have is about the subtitles and title cards. The subtitles are written in a small white print that's extremely difficult to read. As for the title cards, which are pretty numerous, the font is at least 3 sizes too small. I don't know what they were thinking, as the information on those cards is important, especially if you are not familiar with the situation and you need that contextual help, and it easily could have been enlarged. My mom and I both felt a strain on our eyes, which did slightly hamper our enjoyment of this otherwise great movie. But I still recommend it in spite of that. Movie number 4 is another war film, but an old one, 1942's Flying Tigers, which focuses on a small American Air Force defending China against Japanese bombers and fighter planes months before Pearl Harbor. The air battles in this one are quite good. There must have been a lot of stock footage used, but it wasn't so glaringly obvious as in some other movies, and the action scenes were good quality. John Wayne stars as a likable leader, coping with the burden of responsibility. His co-stars are Anna Lee as his love interest, and John Carroll as his buddy who joins the crew and almost ruins the movie for me. John Carroll's character drove me nuts. He's cocky, he's kinda mercenary, he wants to steal John Wayne's girl, and I just couldn't stand him. Of course, at a certain point we are introduced to his better, more noble side, and then I had to soften toward him, but not long after that he goes back to being a jerk. Ugh, I liked the movie, but for me at least, it kind of turned into a roller coaster ride. Fun fact, there's a brief performance in the beginning from Bill Shirley, whose name in the opening credits made alarms go off in my head. I was 92% sure that he was the voice actor for Prince Philip in Sleeping Beauty, so I kept my ears peeled, and yup, when he spoke, I recognized his voice. Unfortunately, his character doesn't last for long, which is too bad, as it would have been nice to see him acting for once, not just hear him. Now, that's it for the movies, but my parents and I did spend a significant chunk of time watching the 4th season of The Man in the High Castle, so I guess I'll talk about that. This was the last season, and I think that's for the best. Too many shows nowadays don't know when to end and just limp along to a less than satisfactory conclusion instead of quitting while they're ahead. That said, this show still had a less than satisfactory conclusion, And I'm not sure that it was quitting while it was ahead, either. The Man in the High Castle never seemed to reach the heights of popularity that Amazon Prime hoped for or expected, and in a way that's too bad, because it is an intriguing concept with a lot of possibilities, the world building is great, and there are some amazing performances. But speaking for myself, my interest in the show has definitely fluctuated. The long wait between seasons was one thing, but each season had so much stuff in it that I just didn't care about. New characters who I didn't find that interesting or memorable, and twisty subplots and rabbit trails that may have been mind-blowing in their complexity, but confusing isn't necessarily the same as good or deep. It also didn't help that the antagonists were consistently more intriguing and sometimes even more compelling than the protagonists. I rooted for the good guys by default, but not by choice, as those characters were often dull, remote, or just plain unlikable. The show at least seemed to be aware of this, as it began spending more and more time with its chief, morally gray antagonists, which was fine, but then I felt a huge divide growing between scenes and plot lines I found genuinely interesting, and scenes and plot lines that I would have been okay with skipping, because I just didn't care what was happening. I'm also not sure what all that morally gray character complexity was driving toward, because things got kind of messy at the end. The conclusion is rushed and vague, intentionally ambiguous is what they called it, and that's kind of a cop-out. It felt to me like the show had painted itself into a corner, and then they had to end it somehow, and they wanted to go out with something epic, but they couldn't figure out exactly how to do it, so they just threw a whole bunch of stuff in there, and some of what happens in the last 2 episodes is really exciting, but it doesn't totally make sense, and it's a bit much, and it's a bit forced. There were lots of little abandoned plot threads, too, which left me with a dozen questions, and I guess I won't get any answers. That's okay, though. I'm certainly not asking for a continuation or a spin-off or anything. Just leave it alone. The show had things that I really enjoyed, but it also had some stuff that I didn't like, and I have mixed feelings about it. While we're giving updates on television series, for those of you wondering where we stand on The Fugitive, we are temporarily on hold. As much as I was hoping to review the whole series by the end of the year, the timing just isn't good for that. I've really enjoyed watching the show over the last several months, and I don't want to rush through the last 15 episodes. So I made the executive decision to hold off on finishing the last season until after the holidays, when everything's settled down. Speaking of holidays, I thought I'd let you in on some old but new to me Christmassy movies that I hope to watch this month. Remember the Night with Fred MacMurray and Barbara Stanwyck, which I know at least one of you recommended. Three Godfathers, the 1948 version directed by John Ford and starring John Wayne. There's an old TV version of Miracle on 34th Street that my brother watched on YouTube last year, which stars Thomas Mitchell, Teresa Wright, and MacDonald Carey. If it's still up, I'd like to watch it. And there's another obscure old Christmas movie that was on YouTube that my brother watched last year, 1945's The Cheaters. The premise sounds kind of like My Man Godfrey, a crazy wealthy family adopts a homeless man. I've never heard of it before, and my brother liked it, so I thought I'd check it out. Any other Christmas movies I watched this month, I guess, will be a surprise. Alright folks, it was a short list, but I still managed to make a longish video out of it somehow. I hope you enjoyed the video and the mini reviews. Go ahead and share your thoughts on anything that I mentioned in the comments below if you like, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching!